There's certainly a hopefully very small subgroup of researchers who are fabricating results too,
But
right?
but that would fall under like the few bad apples analogy here.
Well, few, and again, the analogy is always the few bad apples spoil the barrel, right? Like it's not just that they stay a few, but again, the base rate there, I would say somewhere around 20 to 30% who are engaging in some fabrication. And we see that.
Can I extend this analogy here
Sure.
for a second? Because maybe it's not a few bad apples spoil the barrel, but maybe it's a few bad apples outcompete the good apples because they can get published in the top tier journals and the cycle repeats itself.
Right.
Is that a more apt analogy?
I think so. Yes. I think they're certainly out competing. And it's not just that they're fabricating results, but that they're fabricating them for papers that often present the kind of sexy stuff that people talk about at the water cooler, that get the TED Talk invitations, that get you featured on NPR. So it pulls the entire field in a direction of doing certain types of research as well. What appears that they're able to generate these amazing results. That to me is one part of it. Another thing that bothers me as well is some of it is just born of ignorance. I think there's a malicious undercurrent, and then there's a part where people just don't know what they're doing. And a good example of that, which is not, well, it's kind of in the IO field as well, is some of the work that I did on power posing. Amy Cuddy's famous, stand like Wonder Woman idea. I was the first. I was actually reading the paper for an undergraduate class because I wanted the students to see an easily digestible paper, and then they looked at the TED Talk and see how it was, the impact it had on people in general. And I was reading the paper, and there were some statistical errors that jumped off the page, and I ended up emailing the first author, as I have a habit of doing. And she basically, after some quick back and forth, gave me this huge mea culpa about how they'd basically fabricated the results and everything had been p-hacked, and sent me all of their materials, including some early drafts of the paper, which we can get into as well. But the big problem there that we realized is that there was this whole controversy around power posing, whether it actually works. And dozens of researchers went out to try to replicate the study. So I think there were like 30 papers that have tried to replicate power posing.
Well, can I jump in here? Because
sure.
And this is really important. That's still like one of the top 10 TED Talks out there that I get circulated back to me like once a month.
It's number 2, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at all of these papers, including the original one, the experimental design is very straightforward. They have a treatment group, which is asked to power pose, right? You hold this position for 2 minutes. And then the control group, or the ostensible control group, sits in a slouched position for 2 minutes, right? Hunched over, sort of they call it a contracted pose. And then they find a difference between the two groups, and they say, therefore, power posing is good for you. What neither the original study or any of the, other than maybe 2 or 3, so the vast majority of these other replication efforts did, was to actually have a control group. None of them have people sitting or standing normally, right? The 2 or 3 that do find that power posing does nothing in comparison to the control group. It's slouching that's bad for you. So the advice is basically don't slouch, which I seem to remember my grandmother telling me like 40 years ago.
So grandmotherly advice is working.
Yeah, but all of these PhDs at all these prestigious universities designing studies lacking a basic control group. I'd be mad with my undergraduates if they came to me with a design that lacked a control group. How is this happening? And all of these journals, Psychological Science, JAP, they're all publishing this stuff.
And they're all publishing, and it boils down to, or funnels down to, organizations where you have researchers that don't. It's hard to get a control group sometimes in practical settings, but when this is now the accepted method, it becomes even more difficult